Welcome back. You're watching TVC News Hour. The United Nations has estimated that Nigeria needs more than $337 billion to implement the Sustainable Development Goals from 2019 to 2022. In its support plan for the Sahel, the breakdown shows that the cost of implementing the SDGs is $80.6 billion in 2019, $82.8 billion in 2020, $85 billion in 2021, and $87 billion in 2022. Well, the plan also records that the 10 countries under the UN Integrated Strategy for the Sahel needs an average of $148 billion annually to implement the SDGs, or $594 billion from 2018 to 2022. Now, the plan targets to scale up efforts to accelerate lasting peace in 10 countries, which are Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Chad, the Gambia, Guinea, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal. Well, the United Nations strategy was approved by the Security Council in 2013 and is a part of a preventive and integrated approach in strengthening governance, security, and development in the region. Well, the Executive Director, Connected Development, Ojonwa Miachi, joins us now from our Abuja studio to discuss this development. Good to have you here on the News Hour at this time. So, yes, the Sustainable Development Goals are the blueprint, we understand, to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. And they address the global challenges we face, which includes poverty, inequality, climate, environmental degradation, prosperity, peace, and justice. Now, my question is this: how far do you think Nigeria has gone in achieving the SDGs?
Checking the nuances and the diversity in results from different subnational strata like the states, it can be seen that we still have a long way to go in achieving the SDGs, particularly regarding education. Now we can see that the 10.5 million out of school children has increased from that figure to 13.2 million children out of school. So we still have a long way to go towards achieving the SDGs by 2030.
All right, but before we talk further about the SDGs, we had the United Nations Millennium Declaration in 2000, of course, which was adopted by world leaders with very much the same goals. Why do you think that Nigeria failed to achieve the Millennium Development Goals?
Well, for the Millennium Development Goals, the creation process was quite different from what we have today for the SDGs. The Millennium Development Goals was not inclusive. It's like an elitist group of people just sat down and said, okay, these are the new goals that would help you end poverty. This is what would help us end challenges with education and health. But the SDGs took a different turn. It was quite inclusive. There were different initiatives like the My World Survey, which captured the voices of people in rural communities. There were consultations with different youth groups, with even government, this time national governments from both the Global South and Northern South and Northern Global North were involved in the creation process of the SDGs. So I think because of the inclusive nature of it, ownership can be created more. If governments can now take more ownership, citizens can take more ownership of the SDGs. And this would likely have a positive impact on our likelihood of achieving the SDGs.
Now, the United Nations estimates that Nigeria needs about $337 billion to implement the SDGs from 2019 to 2022. How feasible do you think this will be realized, given this estimates reeled out by the United Nations?
With the development actors involved this time, it's not just, there's going to be counterpart funding, which makes governments from the Global South, like Nigeria, to be more committed towards implementing the funds financially and also socially. Apart from that, there's also private sector involvement. When the private sector is also involved, there's also that likelihood of follow-up with project implementation, because you know, the major goal for private sector is profit maximization. So if these factors are part of what would raise the funding for the 337 billion, and there's a likelihood of the funds being raised. Also, we should also consider the fact that there's a global discourse on sustainable financing measures like sustainable tax. So if tax is improved, tax that involves social justice, or that like progressive tax where the richer are taxed more than the poorer in the communities, then there's a likelihood of actually raising these funds to achieve the SDGs.
All right. Now, how do you think that we can improve the implementation of the SDGs? Because if you look around, you realize that so much poverty still pervades the land. There is still so much of social exclusion and all of that. There's still hunger in the land. What can we do? How do we improve the implementation of the SDGs to ensure that the goals are realizable?
I think that there are two ways I would raise because of the time constraints. One would be participatory budgeting, where it's not just at federal level we are talking about the SDGs. States should also have some form of ownership of the SDGs. A budget on education should look at the targets of the SDGs, where there are issues like gender equality, adequate learning for children, and include it in their budgeting for education. So if states and local governments are more aware of the tenets of the SDGs, then there's the likelihood of it being implemented at that subnational level where the actual impact of the implementation will take place. Participatory budgeting is quite important because communities now, rural communities like people in Ninte, in Kotonkarfe, can be a part of the process of saying, this is what my community needs. I know about the SDGs because awareness has been created by government, by civil society actors. And I think, you know, our community needs a school. Our community needs a water system that we can use for health purposes, for feeding purposes. If these kinds of participatory budgeting measures are put in where government has a feedback mechanism between themselves and the community members, then there's a chance of, you know, that synergy leading to the achievement of the SDGs. There's also the part where we need to follow the money, where we demand for accountability and transparency, where citizens, civil society actors and governments can actually track government spending.
All right, and at that point, I'd like to thank you very much, Executive Director, Connected Development, Ojonwa Miachi, for your analysis on TVC News Hour this time.
Thank you.